Good afternoon, everybody. I'm JP Hayes. I am the marketing director of Connect Space. I want to welcome you to Back to Business Fall and give you a little bit of an understanding of what we're trying to achieve here. What we're trying to do is replicate the types of conversations we as event professionals have when we're doing a load-in or we're starting to design a space with other vendors. It's where we talk about events that we've shared, different vendors that we've tried, different tips that we've picked up. So let's just get right into it. We've got a really great panel. I'd like to get us started by bringing to the stage Gill, President and CEO of Specialty Events. Hello, Carol. Next up is Beverly Maddox, Director of Signature Events at the Detroit Regional Chamber. Hi, Bev. Please allow me to introduce, if you don't already know him, Mike McConnell, the president of AVL Creative.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Mike. And lastly, Chris Sharpe, who is the production project manager at AVL Creative.
Hello, everyone.
What I think you all might be kind of amused to know is that Mike and Chris are both joining us. The AVL Creative is headquartered in Detroit, but they are joining us from an event in Houston. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. We're in the middle of an event, and these are the conversations we're trying to proceed and share and grow with. So I'm going to start with the first question. I'm going to start with you, Carol, and then anyone, if you have some additions. I know we all have a little bit of experience here. In Michigan, we have been doing live events for the summer. A lot of people kind of went directly from virtual right into live with a very little transition, of possibly no transition into having done a hybrid event. Carol, have you done a hybrid event yet? Like a true hybrid event versus a blended event?
Absolutely, and the most recent one was last Friday in Detroit. So
great. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Is there anything, are there any tips or anything that you are like, okay, this is what I've learned? I know that everyone here has done a little bit, but I know that we're picking up tips as our planners are just now starting to do them.
Right. So a couple things. So this was a grand opening event, which is always challenging to do virtual because It's very hard to recreate that energy, right? So we chose to do a hybrid, which enabled the speakers to be live and the ribbon cutting to be live. So we had some energy around that, and then the rest of the audience joined virtually. So I think it's just really important throughout that planning process to make sure that you have someone in the room looking at both points of view as you plan and design this event. So as you go through the steps, we had transitioned from live to hybrid. You want someone saying, you know what, if I'm in the virtual audience, this isn't going to work for me.
Right.
So stop right here. Let's reconsider that plan. And then someone saying, wait, I'm going to be in the room. That's not going to work for me. So keeping that dual perspective all the way through, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's that thought that, are you still planning for two events and trying to make it one? Bev, you and I were talking a little bit earlier about some of the hybrid experiences that you've been working on with the regional chamber.
Yeah, so I work full-time with the Detroit Regional Chamber, but we have a partnership with Michigan Economic Development Corporation through their Pure Michigan Business Connect program. And I help them with a lot of their events around the state. And we did an event back in October where we did it hybrid, where we had a location in Southfield, a location in Jackson, and we had the speakers come in, and we also had pitch companies that were doing pitch competitions. And then the audience was virtual. So we had a lot of different components associated with that, and it really worked really well. So we were switching between both locations and doing the pitching and the judging and all of that, while we also had our attendees online or on the virtual platform, as well as we did an exhibit platform we did an exhibit area on the platform as well, so that attendees that were attending virtually still had, networking opportunities and things like that. So it was really cool, but a lot of work. Like Carol said, you have to make sure that everything is going to make sense in terms of, making sure that the virtual audience is getting that experience, even though they're not live.
Well, and even the timing of it, just because you are doing different locations. Has anyone done or had experience with the full scale trying to manage the balance between a live audience of, say, more than 25 people and marry it with the virtual component yet? Because I know that a lot of our planners that we're working with, They're just starting to get into that space of doing conferences that way. So I don't know, Mike or Chris, if you have done any of that, or we're starting to actually see that more now, because everyone's talking about hybrid, but have any of us actually done the full scale?
Yeah, I would say at this point, over half of the events that we're producing have a hybrid component. And I mean, hybrid isn't it's not a new function, but what's new is having to, like Carol said, marry the two pieces. Before you would live stream an event just simply for the people who couldn't be there, and you would just have a clean stream, and it would be through something like YouTube or something simple, right? And now it needs to be a full turnkey activation, right? You need to be able to capture your analytics like you would if people were in the room, because now those are your people in the room. Yeah. So we've definitely done it full scale. We, like I said, being more than half of the events that we've done are bringing in this hybrid component. We've had 10,000 virtually and 500 in a room, and they may even need to communicate. So the people on the virtual audience may need to communicate with the people in the room. Same with the speakers, they'll do two-way communication. So that's a big piece too, is whether you need two-way communication, what that hybrid component or that virtual component really is it's changing daily, and everybody wants something a little bit different. Mm-hmm. So from the production side of things, we need that management. You need someone who can see both sides of it, because that's what's most important to us.
Right. So are you feeling like a lot like with you and Mike, Chris, and then Bev and Carol, all of a sudden the event manager is taking on all these roles, and still, like, I know for me, I come from a facilities background, and before that kind of more of a traditional component, but I always relied very heavily on the AV piece. And then where there are all these different things, registration was handled completely separately, but now there's the mobile apps that a lot of the platforms have integrated that help make it easier. But is there any focus from a planning perspective that people are having, trying to get people networked? Say you've got your virtual crowd that you're well aware of, and then you've got your live group, and it's trying to mingle those two together. It feels like that's the next step that everyone's trying to focus on. How do you do that? Like the space that I used to manage was a main large, and a lot of you've been there. It was 11,000 square feet, and then all these side offices. So how do you do the side offices? I know that we're working on doing interactive sessions so that people can actually break out and then still be a part of these. And I think it's the next step, it feels like, you guys tell me, is there a way to do a breakout where you have, say, 500 people breaking out to 25, and is that 25 made up of live and virtual? And is that a doable thing? Or again, are we getting into budgets that just get bananas?
Things doable. Anything and everything is doable. And honestly, more so in the virtual world. It's a different kind of doable, where, within the room, it's what can be physical and what can be an experience and what can be a moment. Where what we're seeing is with the virtual, it's how do you keep people engaged? It's a lot harder to keep people engaged in front of a screen. Mm-hmm. And, I can't speak to it from a planning side necessarily on how to keep them engaged, but all of those different components of breakout rooms and registration and data analytics, all of that is doable. It's just all very customizable right now. Every platform is a little different. Right. Every component is a little different. Everything's an add-on. So learning what the needs are on the planning end is probably the most important piece. Right. And then we're able to put it together on a production.
And to that point, sorry.
No, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and to that point, we're seeing that the pre-production is really where we can draw that idea up and give more than just a one-day live show. We can have a 30-day prior to leading up, building excitement, getting people involved, and then have your show and then doing the recap and still keeping them engaged. So your one-day show now is a 60-day event. Right. And that's what we're seeing that transition to.
Is that what, that kind of leads to something for Carol and Bev. Does that bring a new marketing component with some of this hybrid portion of it? Like all of a sudden you do have these marketing capabilities. You can track a lot of your email communications from within the platform. You can design the look of your platform to match whatever's going live. Is that the next phase of kind of the hybrid piece, is really fleshing out the marketability of the whole thing? I just feel like there's so many components now for an event producer.
Yeah, and certainly it's attractive to sponsors, right? Because now you can keep them in front of your audience longer. To Chris's point, it's not just one day. If you keep content up on that site, people can come before, during, and after, and sponsors love that.
Right. And we all
We
know.
can give them metrics, right? We can tell them
Right.
how many people logged in early.
Right.
And I think to your point, I think, just trying to learn and understand what's out there, right? Looking at your budget and seeing what you're able to do as well, because to Chris and Mike's point, there's a lot out there, but it's just, I think and I would say for us, we're still trying to figure that out. We have not done an actual live attendee event and a virtual attendee event. I think the closest we probably have come is probably Mackinac, but we always stream that. We don't, so it's not something where they're actually interacting with, our sessions or anything like that. But I think to your point, the next evolution is looking at that and saying, okay, what can we do? What's out there? What's going to make the most sense? I think it would be attractive to sponsors, but how do you keep the attendees engaged? And, so there's a lot of unanswered questions, and I think it's going to be some trial and error in 2022, but we'll figure it out like we've been figuring it out, and we'll be good.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's got to be these kinds of conversations where you're like, what are you guys doing? Because the content out there is like, we got this figured out. I'm like, do we have it figured out? I'm not sure we have it. I feel like we're figuring it out. So yeah.
Well, there's also a lot of that pre-production that Chris alluded to. I won't say that it's gone away, but everyone's last minute. Everything is last minute. It's not their own fault, but it's just the way that the industry is right now, because people can and they will, and now that's what we're kind of forcing ourselves into. So, and we're also seeing we're seeing a lot less intercompany planners and coordinators, and that piece of the puzzle that the production companies normally don't do, like what Carol's team does. We're seeing that's missing. Some of Carol's competitors are gone, and intercompany, actual internal departments shed those departments through the pandemic because they didn't need them. They weren't planning events. Well, now that events are coming back and they're hybrid or if they're virtual, I mean, I don't know, Carol or Bev, how you guys, but through the pandemic, I would say probably 80% of the full virtual events that we did, there was no planner there, that we didn't have that piece. And that's really difficult for us, because although we have, project managers and we have pre-production planners on staff, that's not what we do. That's not what any AV company or decor company does. So we're seeing a big missing chunk with that.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I mean, you look at who our clients were. Our clients typically have been marketing, comms, or in-house event planners. Now I'm getting calls from IT people, right? Who this has been dumped on them because somehow that, falls in their world to do a virtual meeting, and they have no clue necessarily how to design a meeting or wrangle that. So even the types of people we work with are different, because we do see that gap. A lot of people got laid off internally.
Yeah.
They retired.
So
I'm
true.
not, half the people I know are selling real estate now, but you know what? I want to jump on something that Mike said, because I have cards, because this is how I operate. It's at the back of the thing. I did look at them. I was going to ask you, how has this changed production for you and Chris and the rest of the team at AVL? Like because that's just it. And this is what we're trying to do is those CMU students, Michigan State, I know people that are doing freelance now that I don't know if they want to be doing freelance, but because of the pandemic, it's like, all right, well, I'll just pick up gigs when I can. Because I do feel like the production side is being asked to do things now that I'm like, do you really want to handle registrations? I wouldn't think so, but
that is the biggest issue.
Right.
Yeah. That is the issue that we're seeing more than anything. It's not, we're problem solvers. We're client first. That's what we've always been. That's how we've built our business. So obviously we're doing as much as we can, but it's not our piece, and we are getting pulled into that registration mode. And although we can help facilitate the technology, we don't normally facilitate the conversation with the client, right?
Right.
That and we're seeing that they want it from top to bottom. So even with the event registration, then we're going into run of shows, and then you're trying to understand what they're trying to, I guess, formulate in their head and put it on to paper and actually execute it. And that's the challenge that we're seeing, to the points of Carol and everyone on this call, that, you're getting a call from an IT associate. We're getting calls from CEOs of companies that they shouldn't be doing that. They should really understand that the value of their time should be used for them, and that's what the event production companies are there.
Well, and the skill sets that event professionals like Bev and Carol, it's not just a dime a dozen, these are people who, we all talk about soft skills, so we know how to speak to our client, but we also know how to get the information from them in a different way, if you will. And a lot of that is based on designing the actual events and the relationship, I think, between the event planner and the AV company, which has always been pretty close anyway. That has evolved too. Is like I work for a tech company now, which is sort of funny, but I do, and I'm learning stuff, and I can see like some of my coworkers, like, yeah, we know, but it's like all of a sudden the skill set, the learning curve is enormous. So there's going to be this army of event planners that suddenly are very technologically sound because they have to be, but that's super stressful. The marriage between you guys, say Carol and Bev with Mike and Chris, or whatever production, that's critical, because when you're trying to ask one group to do it all, that's where things get dropped a little bit. Your focus, you have your focus of what you really excel at, and then you bring in the experts for other components. But when you're being asked to be that expert for all things, that's where some things get kind of lost. And I think for me personally, it bothers me as a professional wanting to do things. By the way, I just want to interject. We told Chris early on, because you guys are doing some support for an event setup, just go to Black. You don't have to tell us why. We know why. Chris is taking care of business right now as the production project manager for an event in Houston. So we're just rolling with it because that's what this is.
Which is a large virtual component as well. I mean, this event is a hybrid event as well. So
is it? Because Mike was showing us earlier, just for the audience, we all got together backstage first to check sound and all the rest, and I went into full blown panic. Yes, he was walking around at one
there goes Chris.
swinging on something in the event. But I am going to ask a really quick question from our audience. Jody was wanting to know, to kind of go back with the 30-day buildup now that the sponsor being on display it's a little more robust. And we all know that sponsorship helps raise funds as well. So that's kind of a nice negotiating piece. But what are some of the things that you've seen done or you're doing to hype the event other than social media or email? Like, what are there ways that you're able to hype this event differently than maybe we weren't able to during the pandemic? Or is it kind of like business as usual? Each event is its own animal, and so you just respond accordingly?
I'll tell you, from the virtual side, that's going to have to be a Carol question, because I don't know how they make it exciting and get people in the room, but I've seen it successfully done. We just turn it up louder and make the lights brighter usually. Right. So,
well, I'm with Jody. I would like to know, because even just Mark, there's so much content out there right now. Everybody's online. The competition is fierce for viewership. So anybody, if anyone has, I love it, roll with it's the season's motto. Thanks, Samantha. Or thanks, Samantha. But do you have little things that you've seen work?
So one of the things we did on Friday, which is kind of interesting, and we're not sure yet, frankly, if this was a best practice or something not to do again, but we had a large event that was open to the community, but we wanted certain community groups to be part of it. And typically you go through a reg system and the invitation would go out to, several thousand people from the same person, whether it's, the event planner or the organization. And this group chose to take all the different groups that were planning at the different organizations to send into. So, and you know what? This community group knows our name. So we're going to put our name on that invite and send it out, as opposed to, the chance that they might not recognize, because we all get so much email and things get buried. And maybe if there's already a relationship between you and the invitation or the person, that you may not go to spam. So it was pretty chaotic. And we had to really wrangle everyone and say, okay, claim your attendees. Who are you going to invite? Did you do it? Did you send a follow-up, right? Follow the normal process. We're going to do it 7 days out, know before you go. But it was really interesting. I'd like to think that people showed up because they really knew the person inviting them. It was a
right. It was personal instead of a marketing email that Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty because that's what we do in business. You know, I think most people understand that that's part of what you do, and you hope it lands and resonates for what you're trying to communicate out. But yeah, I never thought from a marketing perspective, when you're looking at success of even email campaigns for events, something not going to spam or not bouncing, how critical that information comes. I mean, we use it within our system. If we use our system to email, like I send an email to attendees today as a reminder, I will get the metrics on that and I will see what potentially went to spam, not likely because they've already been receiving information. But yeah, it becomes critical. Like, did the messaging even get to where I needed it to get? Sometimes you don't get that confirmation. I do want to kind of transition this conversation a little bit into, obviously, we're still talking about the pandemic and COVID and different things are coming, going. Like I said, we've been doing live events. The Delta variant's getting a little more intense. I've been having conversation with different planners, kind of what their experiences are. Yvette Campbell has been a really nice resource. We were talking about some of the conventions that she's been to with her organization, as they were like the first groups down in Florida to have proof of vaccination and that kind of thing, and then the mask mandates. And you know, one of the experiences that she had that when she was in Tampa is that they did have a mask mandate. We have them up here too for certain things. Like if you go to a football game, you don't have to wear one when it's not, when you're outside, but when you're enclosed, you do have to wear them. But is anyone really checking the person at the football game in the bathroom to make sure they're wearing a mask? And I would think the answer is no. But in this case, they had the labor to tap people on the shoulder and say, could you please put a mask on? So I think it's this thing of mandates, and it's things of all this stuff. And then it's the labor to be able to make sure these things are happening. And I know that I've had a conversation with a couple of you. How has labor or lack thereof? Also, we talked about it a little bit earlier, where the event person is now doing all things, or an IT person is doing things, or a CEO is doing things where, hey, Mike, you want to handle my registration? Or, you know, Chris, how do you feel about, you know, this, that, or the other with a platform? How have you been getting around it? And does anyone know how we find people again?
Don't sleep.
That's
it.
Right.
That's it. I mean, you can't. I mean, that you hope that the people and techs and, you know, bodies will be there that you need. You plan for the 10-20% overage of the no-shows or the change. We haven't seen it. It's unprecedented in this time to get the labor. And even when you do, you're hoping it's to the caliber, because you can't be that quote unquote one-trick pony anymore. You have to do multiple roles and tasks. So we're seeing that constantly. And, you know, we're here in Houston. Sorry,
we can hear you building.
Yeah, there's saws and stuff going on in the background. But, you know, that's a technician. That's my audio tech that is cutting down wood to build a platform.
Well, and
everybody's in it for the end result, and that's a phenomenal show.
I'll tell you, the labor shortage is a huge struggle. But what we're seeing and the people that we're seeing shine out of the labor shortage has been incredibly eye-opening and great for our company. We've been able to hire a lot of really great talent. We've been able to elevate a lot of our internal talent who made it through the pandemic with us. And that's been nice, because really what the problem is from a labor shortage that we're seeing, it's the people that already don't want to work or can't work that we're short, right? So, you know, to Chris's point, there's no such thing as a one-trick pony. There's no such thing as someone who can sit behind a console anymore and run a show. They're doing everything. And if they're able and willing and capable to do that, then they will shine and they will elevate and they will make us all a better event community. And, you know, it's that labor that we're learning a lot from, but it's all the other labor that we can't find.
Right. Well, I know Alex, who's a coworker of mine, is going to put a couple of links in the chat for folks. I know that some of you are looking to potentially bring on some new team members. So I want to make sure everyone has access, right? Yes. And like I said, we do have, so for some of the attendees from CMU or MSU, what is some of the conversation with these up and coming event people? I think, I know there's certain technical things to do. I know, like for me, I went to the University of Mississippi with a hotel restaurant management degree. I have a culinary degree. Like there were very specific things. AV is not my world. I don't know if there are degrees for that, or if there's something adjacent that would help with that, or if it's trades and you get right into it and you just start at the ground. Like Mike, your background kills me. I look at you and I'm like, you should be a wizardly looking old man with a beard. You've been just because you've been your knowledge and you've been in the industry. And then I look at you and I'm like, I happen to know how old you are. It's not that old, but it is.
Thank you. I'm honored.
I don't want to disparage but I can't believe the level of experience you have for someone who chronologically where you sit. So what are those things what are some recommendations?
There are degrees. I'll be honest, I'm not going to hide it from anybody that's listening. That's not a requirement on any job application we would ever put out. It is, a lot of it is about your past experiences in this industry, but that doesn't mean we're not afraid to hire young and hungry either. Because like I said earlier about not being a one-trick pony, you can be the project manager of an event and also the guy that brings coffee. Brad, wait. But it's true. It's really about, and this is saving my life. So
enjoy.
Fueled by coffee.
But it's true. It's, we're looking for young, we're looking for hungry. I'm not afraid to admit that. And it's what we're finding is that kind of bringing people up and elevating people in this industry is something that we like doing. We enjoy doing that. So we are hiring. We're just hiring very specifically.
Right.
And where do we find those people? Outside of other companies that brought them up in the ranks for us, which we appreciate that. Outside of that, we look at anybody who's interested.
Right.
And when to that point, I see a lot of the new faces that come in, and you can gauge on their demeanor, their tone. I don't want to say you can read a person, but within that first few hours, how your day is going to go with, if you're hiring hands or, just contractual workers for that event. And what we're seeing is, and the texts that keep coming back that we request and ones we want to show are the ones that are hungry, the ones that say, hey, I don't really know that, I'll figure it out. Or can I shadow somebody? They're not afraid to admit that.
Right.
I always say hire for culture and trained for skills.
Yes.
So true. It's so true. Well, it's one thing too, a lot of you said, where do we find a lot of these people? It's the freelance market. The AV freelance market is very strong. We utilize freelancers regularly. I think we have over 40 freelancers that are working this weekend for us across the family of companies. And that's on top of our full-time employees. And what we like to do is we like to find these freelancers that are young and hungry and self-motivated to find their own money and find their own path. And then we like to bring them in and we like to job offer these people and give them a career as opposed to a freelance, know. And some people can freelance for a career. I don't mean to disparage that. Freelancing is the way of the future, undoubtedly. But that is a big place that we hunt for people. And what's been good and bad is that a lot of good techs have found themselves back in the freelance market through the pandemic. Yeah. Whether it's because they got laid off or they just willingly chose to leave, said position because maybe that position changed and then they worked their way back into the freelance market. So it actually allowed for kind of a nice shuffle in the industry, and it allowed for people to really find what their passion is and if they want that career or they want that hustle. So it's been interesting, but that's where a lot of our, probably in the last 6 months, that's where the majority of our new hires have come from. And we're building back up to where we were. So.
Right. Yeah, I love that too. I love to hire independent contractors, and we also have a history of hiring clients, right? Because they're getting to know us.
We do. And,
it's a great way to kind of get to know the organization.
Like Chris?
Especially with the technical side of things, right? Let me ask you, do any of you do, and I know it's hard when you're it's hard when you're kind of in a weird labor space where you are wearing multiple hats and things are stretched a little thin. So, you know, are you open to interns right now? Is that something, you know, we've got a whole army of interns getting ready to like try and get some experience. You are. Okay, fantastic. Because I just want to make some of our student attendees aware that that is an opportunity and not to be thrown by freelance. You know, oh, well, I'm not freelance or I don't have this experience. So gig work,
And we pay them.
and
Right.
we pay them. That's magic to some people's ears, because I wouldn't take an internship without being paid, but that is just me.
They deserve it.
So
They deserve it.
they deserve it. So I do have some questions. Bev, you know, I'm going to start with you just because you've been working with the team. Obviously, the McConnell conference, for anyone joining us that's not from Michigan, it's a very big conference. It's civic leaders, it's government, it's business. You're doing the wristbands. You did the vaccine mandate, and some people had opinions, and that's fine. You know, to each his own. You didn't lose any sponsors, but I want to more gear towards the conversation around what are some of the protocols that you had that your team did bring in, or the team that's working on that specifically brought in, and then the rest of you, if you have some examples that you've seen that work, that are very efficient and, you know, really kind of lend itself to the client and attendees feeling confident, secure, respected, all of it.
Yeah. So you named some of them already, but I'll just kind of like reiterate. So I just want to say that our chair this year was Wright Lassiter, who is the president and CEO of Henry Ford Health System. And we could not have had a better chair this year, considering everything that's been happening with the pandemic. And so, although I was not a part of the committee, I will say I know our organization was very committed and dedicated to making sure that we can keep our attendees as safe as possible, making sure that we're following protocols and things that we can do to try to do that. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things was we did limit the amount of attendees. So there was a cap that we put on attendance this year so that we could allow for more social distancing, because anyone that's been at the conference in the past, I mean, you're in there like sardines, right? Because that's the whole point. Everyone wants to network, everyone wants to get together. And so we had to put a cap on attendance. We also went through Clear Health, Clear Health Pass is what we used to make sure that every attendee that registered had to go through that process to make sure that they did have their vaccination, unless there was a special case where it was religious based, or it was you could not have it, then there was something else that was done for those individuals separately. So the attendance cap, the vaccination clearance. We also did the wristbands, as you mentioned, so that people would know ahead of time, once you get on the island, can they touch you? Right. You know, should they stay far away?
I love the wristbands. I want them for life in general.
Exactly.
Stay away,
girl. Right.
How'd they work? Did people, I'm really curious about that, because I've been looking at that. Did people,
yeah, so people did wear them. And then it was, so some of the speakers, if you watched any of the sessions, like the governor, I think she had on 2 wristbands, right? A red one, and I want to say a green one too. So she didn't go into like why the difference, but she had on both. But we did that. We also had the mask mandate where, in open spaces and in a theater, you needed to wear a mask. And I did not attend it as physically, but I did some virtual things related to it, and I could see that a lot of the attendees were adhering to the mask. We also have security on site, but we had security on site even before the pandemic for various reasons, obviously with the conference. So having that security this year, just to make sure that protocols are being followed, and also making sure that we didn't have anyone on the island that did not go through the clear process. We can manage that as well. So. But yeah, we did, a lot of things leading up to it to prepare and make sure that everyone was safe. And then obviously on the island, we also did seating a little differently. We tried to do the stage, differently as best we could in terms of some social distancing. We had talked about that ahead of time for speakers where we could. Anyone that's been on the island, again, just understanding that there's an older hotel and you can only do so much. But But at the same time, yeah. And I'm interested in hearing more about from some of my team members. All of us didn't go, but some of my team members that did go, finding out, like, you know, what was sort of the on island experience from an event planner perspective,
Right.
finding out like how that went. But the planning that went into it, we diligently made sure that we did things and followed precautions and things like that. So, and also, if someone were to catch it on the island, there was a protocol and procedure for that as well, to, you know, contact tracing, you know, with the, you know, there was a protocol for what needed to happen if that took place. So I'm excited to say, like I said, the conference went off without a hitch. I don't know all of the back end details just yet, but I'm excited and interested in knowing more of that when they get back home. So,
well, I want to also give another resource to attendees. If you go to our Expo tab on the left-hand side, it looks like a little HUD. If you click on that, there is a tab for meetings made easy. Marie Altizer, she and I worked together years ago at the Ritz-Carlton, and we reconnected. And after we stopped laughing, talking about sales meetings that no one should ever know anything about, we got into the conversation of what are some of the resources that her organization can provide, and they partner with groups. If anyone out there is looking for a HIPAA compliant system of verification, Marie can give you some information and help you along those lines. I asked her if we could provide that information, and she approved it. So please feel free to reach out to her, because I can't speak to that specifically. But I do want to jump into something, you know, some of it about like what you can ask people and what you can't ask people. And I was talking to Diane Drago with DMS Events, and you can ask someone if they're vaccinated. That doesn't mean you should ask someone if they're vaccinated. Everyone has to kind of handle that for themselves. Some of the language that I found myself in a situation where we're talking about doing some things here, some events, and I was like, oh, I don't know. What do I ask? Can I ask someone? I don't want to ask someone. I don't feel like it's my place. So I started asking test questions of some of my event friends. I'm like, if I asked you if you were comfortable being in a space where I couldn't verify your vaccination, or if you're just comfortable being in a space with other people right now to be a presenter, are you comfortable with being in with other people? And it just, some people were like, wait, what? And some didn't think twice and were like, I'm not comfortable, or I am comfortable. And I found that to be the easiest question, because we are hybrid, you know, we're an online platform. So I have an easy resource. And like, if you're not comfortable being in a space, you can be hybrid. So for me, it was an easy out. One of my friends who does hair and makeup, she goes, I like that question because I know people that have anxiety issues that don't necessarily want to be forward about it. So if you just ask people if they're comfortable presenting in a room with people, it sort of takes the ambiguity out of it. I feel like as we get more towards being very vocal about whether you have to be vaccinated or not vaccinated, or wear a mask if you're indoors, it sort of takes that out of it's lessening the awkwardness of that conversation. But I am only going to speak for myself on this one. I have found if you are in that place and you don't feel like you want to ask that question, you just ask if people are comfortable. I want to make sure everyone's safe and feels respected. Also, Alex is going to put a link into the chat. I have a really interesting article. It was a local TV station out of Washington, D.C. It came out in May, but it talks about what you can legally ask and what you can't. Or what, you know, maybe you can ask this question, but it's the follow-up questions that are the ones that get you in trouble. So that's going to be a link in the chat. I recommend you take a peek at it, and just it gives the sources of who their legal representation is, and that might help you along the way if anyone asks you any questions. So I kind of want to jump off of that because I don't want this to turn into a political conversation. I just want to provide you with some resources, because I think as event folks, the pandemic is one of many different conversations we've found ourselves in the middle of. Like before the pandemic, we were in some dodgy questions. We were like, oh God, what do I do with this? So nothing really changes on that front. But
if I can jump in just real quick on that, when I'm looking at talent and sourcing out technicians or individuals, I do always include that this is an in-person event, whether we're doing a studio virtual or in-person, on location, hybrid, with the amount of attendees projected to be there, just to give them some insight. We do have a lot of technicians that they'll wear masks when they're on camera ops because they're within the thick of it. And, it seems like everyone's acceptance of it is they just kind of do their own thing. But we do see the change in venues that we go to, regardless if there's mask mandates or not. We are classified as vendors, and now they're mandating us to wear masks. So if we don't have on our, AVL gear and we're not pushing boxes, we're then a guest. So there's like this really weird balance you got to play.
Right.
But if you're walking in back of house, you got your mask on. So we're seeing that change, that more and more compliances within companies of states like Texas that we're in right now. Sorry about that. And
Well,
I'll just stop there.
one interesting thing that I've seen lately is now when I get resumes across my desk, I have had people put in the top line, "I'm vaccinated."
Oh, wow.
Get it out of the way. I will be honest with you. I think I did it with both you, Carol, and Bev. I'm like, just so you guys know, I'm vaccinated. I don't expect you to tell me. I'm just going to let you know that I'm vaccinated, and then whatever, we just move on with, but that's my choice to share that. It leads back to the question, can you ask someone if they're vaccinated? You can. They don't have to answer. And again, that article is pretty interesting. I do recommend taking a look, because one of the lawyers on it was like, it's those follow-up questions are the ones that you're going to be in trouble with. So it's just, we are still in kind of this funny space. But I do want to point out that Bridget with Special D said that you all can help find a COVID mitigation team that can handle all those items regarding vaccination and status. So your team's representing, Carol.
We really try and leave that, we collaborate with other companies and leave that to the experts.
That's what they do. Yeah.
I mean, my on-site team has a lot to do to run the meeting.
Right.
It's really not ideal to have them running around and making sure that people are wearing masks.
And there's too much to do, and it's stressful, and it's like this is what they do. They now know the legal aspect of it. They know the health, the HIPAA piece of it. Exactly. You defer to the expert. It's like, listen, don't ask me to produce your event from an AV perspective, because I'm not that person. So that's kind of where that goes. But that actually leads me into some AV specific conversations, and I want to make sure we get into them before we run out of time. So I chuckle because you guys know this question's coming, and I've already asked it to you once, and you guys gave me the same answer, and I feel the same way from an event platform. What is it that you feel event people need to understand, or like one of the more critical things, what do they need to be aware of when they're stepping into this hybrid space, even live or virtual only, but particularly hybrid? What are some of the things that you're like, you just need to know these things coming in? Do you want me to tell you what
1, 2, 3? I mean, they just need to really understand, what are they trying to project? What message are they trying to portray to the viewers online? When you're in a live environment, there's so many things that can take attention: a screen, lights, projector. The sky's the limit. With a stream, it's one feed. So whatever is being sent down that feed, that's why I tell Mike and everybody else, I've been doing this for 12 plus years. I'll do 10, 20,000 person in an arena. I am more afraid of doing virtual events than being in an arena, because you are relying on that one stream. So it does change. And, there's so many more what ifs that are out of your control. I mean, just like on this call, everybody's on a different internet connection. Everybody's on a different type of machine. So there's all these elements. And when you're getting feedback, oh, my screen is frozen, or the stream has stopped, there's no audio, and a client's coming to you because they don't know, and you're trying to mitigate that while running the show, that's the toughest part. And just trying to educate the customer. That's really my PSA is just the understanding.
If the sound in the room stinks, everybody in the room knows.
Right.
But when it's virtual, now you've got 100 people online, 20 of them are having the time of their lives, 20 of them can't hear, 20 of them can't see, and 20 of them can't get logged in, right?
I mean, we did that here before this meeting. You guys couldn't see it, but I'm like, wait, what's happening right now? Like, I was sort of off my game. Not that I'm really ever on my game, because let's face it, I'm not a moderator, you guys. I'm an event person, so thank you for playing. I was a little like weirded out when we first started because we had those same connectivity issues. We have them here too. We made some changes. We had some tweaks, and it was like, it was my internet versus your internet, and that same thing. And it's disconcerting. And I also think the audience has gotten to a place where we're like, yeah, if someone freezes up for a minute, nobody even blinks anymore. We just kind of go, oh, but it's got to be that. It's if you
Whoa,
can't.
I want you as a client.
Well, you
If
know,
somebody freezes up for a minute, I'm fired.
No,
Are you
well, let's talk about the difference between what you produce and what I produce. Maybe I should clarify that because this is our
So-
small, intimate. We're talking at a load-in. You guys do something very different.
One other thing too, like it's run a show with the virtual side. That's what I can tell you, because pre-pandemic, if we got to run a show 2 days before an event, that was
You were
great.
lucky.
That was fantastic. And we
Right.
didn't care. That was
Carol.
fine.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
it's true. And is that stressful? Yes. But if there's 2 screens in a room and I don't know what goes up on them until 2 days before, that's fine. But with the virtual component, if you don't have that run a show at the very beginning,
Mhm.
you cannot flush out these events. If we don't know what breakout rooms go where, or if it's a virtual 2-way communication, all of those components are so important in the pre-production, where
Right.
before pre-production was design, room layout, projector brightness, audio tuning. From an AV standpoint, that was pre-production. Now pre-production is run a show for AV. So kind of that point where I say we're missing that planning piece with some of our clientele. That's where we're missing it, is
Yeah,
they come to
yeah.
us and say, hey, can you quote a virtual event? And we say, well, what does that mean? How
Yeah.
many? There's 3,000 questions. But if you come to me with a run a show and say, can you produce this virtual event? Then the answer is yes.
but you
And
know,
that's-
let me say this. Oh,
Right.
go
No,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was just going to say really quickly from a planner perspective, right? Because I've been in the industry for a long time myself as well. And obviously live events, no question asked. It's like, do it in my sleep. I mean, never take it, never get comfortable, but you know what to do. This virtual space has been a learning, like over the last, has it been 18 months now? Really trying to learn and understand. And it's not just from the planner's perspective, but you're working with the program department. Programmers a lot of programs are not, especially now, because they want everything hot and fresh and right now, don't have the agenda and all of that stuff laid out. So as the planner, we're trying to say, okay, we need this to do this virtual piece because it's so important, but it's like they're having to learn that you've got to have things faster. You know what I mean? So, and then we're, as the planners, trying to learn this virtual platform too, because we don't really know exactly what we want. We just know that we know what the end goal is, but we don't know necessarily how to get there. And so it's been a challenge, even with the small things that we've done at the chamber and with the, MEDC. And now moving into 2022, if we're going to be doing the true hybrid of attendees on one platform and attendees on the other, I'm going to tell you, as a planner that's been in the industry for a long time, I'm still like, okay, help, because I don't know all the pieces, and some of the things that I need to get, I'm not going to get, 4 weeks out or 3 weeks out. I mean, so where's the balance there? Like, how do we? It's a challenge.
Well, I can tell you just some tips from like being a platform ourselves. Lead time is huge. So, and everyone's kind of working on it, and we've got ideas and we've got wishes and hopes and dreams. But it's if you want something more robust than a Zoom call, sure. Can we support your Zoom? Sure. But we also do RTMP, and there's a little bit more to that. And what do you really want to do? But to think that you're going to come onto one of these online platforms, if you have a fairly robust scenario and think you're just going to start from go, the earlier you know what you're doing, lead time is a big deal. Anything within 30 days, you really truly run a risk. And I know it's it's just, you just have to know that as a planner. And then, some of the things to look out for, and, everyone says they're an all-in-one. Sure. Do I want to sell you my platform? I absolutely do. We're a great platform. We're also in the Expo tab. Check us out. But things to look out for, because ultimately I want whoever the end user is, you guys, the attendees, anyone participating, we want you to have a successful event. And that means, like, ask the questions. Be like, when you say all-in-one, what does that mean? Is your mobile app affiliated with your platform? Do they do all these things? Are they actually all inside one platform, or is it components of different? Ask those questions.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Those matter. I'm going to brag on our team a little bit. Alex, poor Alex, you guys saw behind the scenes what I put poor Alex through when we get prep. I'm like, Alex, oh my God, Carol, I need Carol. But Alex is one of our developers. All of our developers work events, so they have an understanding, and our sales folks work events so they can see what it is. They're never going to be the planners that you guys are going to be, or the AV production that you're going to be. But until they know what it is to witness you in your skin, we can't be what you need us to be. So, you partner with your planners. We partner with our planners, listen to them. And a lot of our features come directly from the users, because they're like, we don't need that, we need this. And we're like, got it. Because what we think is sexy isn't what they think is useful. So it's that kind of thing, knowing who
Definitely a partnership, for sure.
Yeah, and don't you think that has been more so during the pandemic? That's the one thing that I think you can characterize our industry that has come out of this, is it the collaboration at all levels has just intensified. The ability to pick up the phone and call anybody, somebody you've seen on a panel, and say, how can I solve this problem? I mean, we do it. The collaboration has been wonderful.
Yeah, there's another group that I want to tell the audience about. So Liz Caruso does the Texie talks, and she's doing one in September, and she does a bigger scale, but she also does, this is the one that I find the most value in. She does Texie Talks Collaborative, and it is a group of event people. It's just event folks talking to each other. Because that's, to me, is where the meat is. Like, sure, would we love to sit here and sell you a plat and do something super sexy and all these things? Of course we would. But the value is in this conversation. I don't know what you guys need unless I talk to you guys, unless I'm listening to hear what you guys need. You can pick up tips from me where I'm like, oh, some of our planners had this. As you move on in your planning, maybe this helps you. So it's that kind of stuff. But I still have Chris, this is for you, since Mike is now managing whatever's going on in your event. RTMP, I don't know if this is like too much to talk about, but people are using Zoom, they're using YouTube, and within these platforms, there's native streaming, and that's when it starts to get dicey. Like, what is RTMP? So in my work, I've done some research on it. And obviously I work with a team of people that do it. How would you describe to either the attendees here or a client that comes up and is like, well, I want to do a hybrid event, but I don't know how does this work? And I even wrote in our run of show, I'm like, I'm thinking switchers. Am I losing my mind? Because I just think everything's a switcher. You plug it in and you guys do some magic.
We know where you're going with it, right? As long as you can kind of conceptualize, in words of what you're trying to do.
Right.
We always start with, where is it going to go? Like you said, are we putting it on someone's platform? Are we putting it on a social platform? You need to know where it's going to go. And then also at that same point and the same importance, what are you trying to get out of it? Is it a one-way? Is it a two-way? Are we bringing multiple guests in? So there's all these different elements that you have to ask, and it's always going back to that pre-production schedule and time frame. RTMP, that all that stuff is just getting really, down to the nitty-gritty, the finite of it. We try to keep it really simple for our clients, and they just say, make it happen, right? We'll work with the IT team. We'll talk their language. We use a lot of acronyms. We use our hands every day, and that type of stuff.
That's why you're my people, Chris, because I do a lot of this.
But we're also, on a question that I want to ask to the group is, when you have that conversation, my next question that you guys are thinking is, how long is your show? What is the time frame that you guys are going to run? Because we've had shows that we found out that we could only stream for 12 hours straight, and it was 15 hours long for the program. Was it great? No, but we learned that.
Right.
What do you think that run time should be of a show? Virtual.
We have this conversation. I work with developers, so we have this conversation because of experiences. So we build in time for things, it comes from, this was what the show was supposed to be, and then it went much longer. So I feel like I'm cheating if I answer that question, because I already know the answer to that question. But yeah, I mean, it's like, what do you
but like Beverly and Carol, I mean, McConnell has its time frames, but if it just say an average client, because we're seeing about a 45 to an hour, you have that attention. If it's a program. Networking, that's still really hard to get the concept pass. You know, that there's all these new things that keep popping up, and keeping client engagement is number one.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to 45 minutes after that, you're going to lose people. I think you need to definitely incorporate longer breaks. Like we always, you know, in the event planning world, we want to have these breaks, but then content tends to compress. And all of a sudden our 30-minute break is now 15 minutes. It's still really important to give people that time because a lot of people are working from home.
Yeah.
And that's their moment when they can not only go off and do their bio break, but they have to check on their kids or do the dog or whatever. So it's important not to squeeze those out. And then moving from a panel to breakouts, right? And moderated breakouts so that people actually show up and accountable and make sure they're engaged. There's a lot of different things you can do, but you know, sitting in front of a screen for 4 hours,
It's a lot.
it's a lot.
Yeah, most of ours have been about 30 to 45. I mean, we've had a few that were an hour because technically we wanted 90 minutes. It's like, no. So we try to stay away even just from an hour long when we're in this virtual space. And, you know, it's just, yeah, timing. I mean, all of that plays such a
You get a lot of drop off after a certain amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, you start to lose people. I feel like that 40, like Carol was saying, that 45-minute mark. Definitely, you know, if you try to go over an hour, but I mean, so, and we don't typically, because the time is already condensed, we have not put breaks in our virtual meetings. So not yet, but I mean, obviously, you know, again, 30 to 45 minutes, a few of them have been an hour, but mostly if you look at our older programs on our site, 30, 45 minutes.
Right. Well, and also to think it depends, like if you're doing certification, if you're doing credit hours, that keeps people engaged because they have.
Well, because they have.
It's all a matter of what you're trying to do. But I do want to. We are running up at the end of our time. I want to just thank a couple of our sponsors really quickly before I forget. August Spree LLC. When you're in the lobby, check out her tab. She has been a huge assist for us just in feedback, and she does some pretty cool networking and helping to identify different vendors in the area and vetting them out. So you should definitely check her out. And then AVL Creative is one of our sponsors. They have that's right, those guys. They check them out as well. I know that we put a link in. I know that they're looking to make connections with people. And then they have a really cool video on their Building 22, and I will still be working that angle, Mike. So, you know, that's coming. I want to mention EventBid is initiative that we've put out there from Connect Space. It is a digital Rolodex that is free access to, it's to help support and promote Michigan vendors. But if you do business in Michigan and you are from Utah or Washington, we just ask that you fill out a form, verify what your business is, because we really want you using we have amazing people here in Detroit. It's one of those things, it's free to everyone. You can use it. We aren't going to be coming for you. We have nothing to do with it other than giving you a tool to use. And then I did want to also just mention that both Bev and Carol are involved in something called the Detroit Event Council. And the Detroit Event Council, for me, I asked earlier what you guys might be using for resources to help you things. That was a huge resource and continues to be a huge resource for me. It's this great collective of event professionals on Facebook. I think Alex has a link that he can put out just to introduce you to it. I loved the initiative. Carol, you had introduced it to me a couple years ago. And it's just a great space. It's a great referral space. If someone's in a panic and somebody just dropped out, like people just step up. Someone will always answer your question. It's not for promoting your business. That's why we actually got the idea for EventBid from one of the members on the Detroit Events Council looking for vendors. So I just want to thank you ladies for being leaders in the industry for that kind of thing. And you always take my calls. I feel like anything can be solved with a glass of wine, a Zoom link, and Bev, my buddy Bev, who's, those are recent, she will get me through any event trauma. And then also lastly, we have the next Back to Business event coming out on December 9th, save the date. Rick Portwood with Display Group will be joining us, Kiana Wenzel with Design Core Detroit. She is the director of the month of design, and then we're still working on our panel. But lastly, I just really want to thank all of you. You're doing events. I know that Mike and Chris and Bev actually have events going on with their organizations. I know Carol's knee deep, elbow deep in planning for events right now. I don't know if you have going on today, but I think you have a big event coming up either tomorrow or this weekend. So I appreciate you taking out the time and sharing with us. And I just hope everyone has a great rest of your weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.